Hello, my name is Quinn Hogue, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a simple setup of a axial control F2152 that's been updated to the 2021.6 firmware. Keep in mind that PLCnext Engineer update version will only work up to whatever firmware you have uploaded to the PLC. I'll also be showing you later how to upgrade firmware in the future. So currently, the first thing we got to do is get control of the PLC itself. There's a few ways you can do this. Pretty much you need to know what the IP address is, and make sure that you are configured onto that same network that you have your Ethernet cable plugged into. The default for the PLC would be 192.168.1.1. So the subnet would be the 192.168.1 subnet. And I'm going to show you how to configure that in your settings on your computer and also on your in the PLC itself, so you can change its IP if you desire to, and you're not running a router setup that automatically assigns IP addresses. I'm going to pause the recording here real quick and get set up to show you a few tools. So a few tools I like to use are Advanced IP Scanner. It's a great tool. It's free to download. It's really helpful when it comes to being able to go and scan different IP subnets and that your computer may be connected to, and see what devices are out there. Also, a good piece of software to have is the Startup Plus. It's good for parameterizing the axial line F.IO stations. Again, this is a free download. And it's found on Phoenix Contact's website. This link will be in the description of the video, as well as the link for the IP scanner. And then finally, the PLCnext Engineer is the other software we'll be needing. So the first step, after you have all that stuff downloaded and configured, is I'm going to show you one way to see if you can see what's on the subnet and stuff. But first, we need to configure our network adapter. So if you go into your search bar and type network, you can go view network properties, or actually it might be quicker to just go to your network through the settings and then go to you want to go change adapter options, and this should open up this page, and then you'll see all your different network adapters that you have enabled. The one we're looking for, at least in my computer's case, is I have a built-in Ethernet port, and this happens to be a killer E2500 gigabit Ethernet connection. Yours may be different. You may not have one built in. You may need a USB adapter, but it will be found in here. And after you have your Ethernet cable connected between your PLC and stuff, this connection will be configurable and stuff. You just got to be plugged in some sort of network. You're going to click on that, and then you're going to scroll down until you get to Internet Protocol version 4 TCP/IPv4. You're going to click on that, and then in here, it's normally going to be set up like this. It's going to say obtain IP address automatically. You're going to change that so you can set a static IP address, and you're going to set it to an address that you know is open on the 192.168.1 subnet. So I like to pick 20. Depending on your network size, that may be used. Since we're just connecting to one PLC and one Profinet module, we know that that should be open. When you click on the subnet mask, it will automatically populate that. And then the default gateway, You can leave this as zeros, all zeros, or you can fill it in with the 192.168, and then .1 would just be the first default gateway if you had a setup like this. Now, if you're plugged into a router, your default gateway is your router's IP address, which is usually the first address in that subnet. So after that, I don't put anything in for the data name server. If you have a data name server, you should put in an address. But in this case, we do not, because we're not connected through a router, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we're just going to click OK. So now we should be on the same subnet as the PLCnext. We can go over here to the advanced scanner. Advanced IP scanner, I'll show you how this tool works. So if you look in here, what you can do is you can click the subnet of this machine, and then they have more than one subnet in here. We're only focusing on the one subnet. If you're connected to more than one subnet, it's going to populate all of them when you click this IP button. But we're just focused on the 192.168.1.1 through 254. And what that'll do is when I hit scan, it's now going to scan through all of those possible connections. It may take a minute or two, depending on what's operating in the background. Now, as you can see here, we're actually picking up both of our modules already, and they're actually on the wireless network I'm connected. They actually are using the 192.168.1 to host a website. So that's why this shows up here. If I was to disconnect from Wi-Fi, I'd only find these other two devices and then my own device. So it's 99% complete. I'm just going to hit stop here. So we know what our module address is, and we know what our Profinet device is. Now, these might not be set as these IPs, and I believe they actually are set like that because of the way I had set it up previously. It just didn't reset them back to their standard. So I'm going to show you another device that can help with actually setting the IP addresses without necessarily being connected to devices directly, but being on the same subnet. And with that, I would use the startup software. So if I go to my folder on here for the Phoenix contact, which is down in the P's, obviously. If we go down here, there's a boot IP assignment tool, which is somewhat helpful when you're connecting a new module. But also on here, there's this thing called NetNames Plus, very helpful software. And what this actually allows me to do is so you can go in here and you can select that, and then make sure you have your Ethernet controller adapter set. And then when you do this, it's actually going to scan for the PLC Phoenix contact software. And then in here, you can actually go in and change these IP address settings, and then you can send it to it. You also are able to like select this flashing on, and what this actually should do is it should flash on the device itself. It doesn't work the best with the Profinet stuff, but the controllers it does work with. So currently the controller is actually flashing. You guys can't see it, but I can confirm it is. So now that we know our IP addresses are set, let's go open up our PLCnext Engineer. I actually misspoke. This is not the most current software, so I have this updated to, if you go into here, I have it updated the most recent version, which is actually if you go onto their website and then you scroll down, you can see their software, the 1.6, slightly older. So the current one actually is the 2021.9 is the current up-to-date version, and that's also what this PLC is flashed to. So I'm actually going to close this software, and I'm going to get the other software open for us to use. And I'm going to pause the recording real quick. Okay, I currently have the software opening up here. It should open up in a second here. Okay, so the most current version is the 2021.9. So that's what we're going to open up. And then I'm going to actually create a new project. So it looks like I'm doing this from scratch. So you're going to find the module you have. So in this case, I am using the 2152 module updated to the 2021.9 is the latest firmware. So if you click on the project template, it should auto configure some stuff and allow us an easy setup. So the first thing we want to do is actually get in here, and we're going to open up the project folder. We're going to see our controller. If we open up that controller, we have some tabs that come down. These are our two different processors. So we have ESM1, which is the first core, and then the ESM2 is the second core. So only one core right now has a task, and it's just a main task. It's not really, it doesn't have anything in there yet, but it's just set up. As far as the project settings, the first thing you want to do is you want to come in here to settings, and your IP subnet should be relatively configured here. If you want, you can set a default gateway. That's just going to make it so that when it assigns other PLC components like the Profinet stuff, it's actually going to be able to give it that default gateway address. So we're just going to set it as what we discussed as the default earlier. As far as the SNMP, you can leave that alone. Scan sources, I like to enable the DCP scan, and then find my Ethernet, which is Ethernet number 2, which we saw earlier. This actually will be used for scanning devices. As you can see here, it's scans for devices by using discovery and configuration protocol. Also, if you can do a ping scan too, if you know what your IP address range is, and you can manually enable and then put in IP address range. But right now we're just going to use the DCP connection. We just want to enable this device connections by analyzing learned MAC address information, and then detect ambiguous connections. This is this pretty much detects is make sure a connection is like known. So as far as the network load, you can kind of leave that information alone for now. Next thing we're going to do is look at our IP subnet. So as you can see, we actually have a we can see our controller already on here. So we can see that it's the name of the station, the IP address, which we saw in the other configuring tool earlier, which if you wanted to, you could change this. It doesn't have to be set as that. The version information, that's a spot for you to enter information about this project, such as like the version history, date, lifecycle, author stuff. And you also can put descriptions, like if you make changes and stuff. I'm not going to be using that personally, but it's a tool that's there. So then finally, our last task to do is go over to online controllers. And what we're going to do is we have a set name for the project. So we're going to search for the controller. And what we're actually going to do here is we're going to set, this is, I'm just going to set this as main, and then PLC. Oh, that's right. So you have to actually make this all lowercase. So it'll be main underscore PLC. You can't use capitals. And it did accept that. And then you select your online device here. And what that should actually do is configure this. So now it named the PLC. So this is the online parameters and stuff. So it set it up to match. After that, there's a few things we can do here. So we want to configure our modules first, pretty much. So we're going to go down to AXC F, and we actually can, if we're go here to the main PLC and hit cockpit, this is going to allow us to actually connect to the device itself. So if we hit connect to controller and that other information was already set and they match, you're going to be asked to put in the password. You can hit remember credentials. So the username is admin by default, and the password is actually printed on your device, depending on which one it is. In this case, it's on the left side next to the QR code. And I'm going to pause it, and I'm going to come back to you as soon as I get connected. Okay, I'm now connected to my devices here, and you can see that by this little icon here next to the main PLC. You also have the ability to launch this web-based management, which is actually extremely helpful. You may get this, your connection is not private error. Just click the advanced and then hit proceed. That's just because of certain security stuff. And then your password and stuff is going to be the same as what it would be to get logged in to begin with. Actually mess it up. So as you can see here, there's a couple cool things you can do with this. You can look at your Profinet, which currently I don't have anything assigned to that. You can also look at your local bus. Again, nothing signed. And you can use this for diagnostic and stuff. You also can configure your network stuff from in here. The key thing I'd like to point out, though, is network services. So one thing I'm actually going to do right away is I'm going to change this so that it's only being used as a Profinet controller and not a Profinet device default. Yeah, both are enabled, but I'm going to disable this one just because I'm not going to be using it as a Profinet device, and it will get rid of some errors that we're going to have. And then after that, you can hit apply and reboot, and I'll be right back to you after it's rebooted and I'm connected. Well, actually, before I go, there's other thing I wanted to show you. So say you're using this for like just a run-of-the-mill project and you don't really want to be logging in all the time. You also can go down to user authentication. And then you want to hit enable disable user authentication, and then uncheck that box and hit save. And what that'll do is it actually will make it so that you don't have to set that password anymore. Now I'm going to go back to the system services and apply that change that I wanted to do. Okay, so now I'm back, and this device should be connected again. So if I actually reload this page, see that everything is now confirmed. You also can check your firmware on here. So our firmware version is the 21.9. This is also where you'd update your firmware from. So you would download the file, and then you'd have to come to this web service management to get it. Now, if you have a controller and this web service management was disabled on it, it's going to make it a little bit of a pain. So I would recommend resetting the controller through the PLCnext software. So if I connect here, You can go to this button here and it resets the controller to factory defaults. And then from there, you'd be able to reconnect to the web service management and do those couple configuration things there and update your firmware. The firmware determines which version of your software you can use. So the more update your firmware, the better the software you have at your disposal. So now let's do a little more configuration stuff. So currently, I have the logon disabled, so it didn't ask me for another password there. So let's configure some modules. So we're going to go here to the axial line. Now, if you know what your devices are, you can add them manually. I actually prefer not to do that because it's a little bit quicker to just come over here. You're going to right click and then you're going to left click that read modules, and it's going to actually auto populate. And these names are actually based off of what I had them named earlier. So that was really simple to configure, and that configuration is now done. And then the other thing we can do is we can open up this Profinet, and then we can go here to online devices. We're to search that. And this is if you have any expansion modules pretty much connected. And as you can see, there is an expansion module. I don't have a project device currently. So what I can do is I can click on this and then click add selected device. Now, if this wasn't configured already, I could go and write a configuration in here. This may already have some parameters. So what you can do is add device, and then you can change this name and stuff. I'm going to keep it local expansion because that's what it is. And I'm just going to add to the project. And then on here, you just have to do one thing, which is determine which module. This is the unpowered, so it's the 1H. Then you click OK. And now the Profinet is configured. You should see then that your lights, the light that's marked D should have changed from yellow to green flashing, which is correct. That just means that it's configured and everything's communicating properly. So now if I go back here to the main PLC, we can see that that in fact is true. So that's the axial line. So the axial line's configured, it's just not really being used at this time. So it's a little confused. So if we actually go here, we can also, so if we go back to project settings, I think that's where, actually I'm a little lost. I'm a little new to the software. I'm still learning stuff, but there is a way to change that name there. I believe I have to go to settings here. So currently this is set on automatic. We can leave it like that actually. It kind of just gets the next free one, or you can set it to manual if you want. It doesn't make much difference. If you have hardware expansion, you can add those, Ethernet IP, that's just some information. The update task, so this is like if you had a task, this would update these variables with that task. I'm just going to leave it blank though. I'm going to change this function. It's a main control local is the location. And then if we actually go here and we're going to file save project, let's say project as, we're going to name this as project 3 just because that's how it's set up. So now if I go back to the cockpit, and then I can write the controller and start the execution. And that's what you would click to build your project and make sure it uploads fine. You should see that flashing D light now is solid, which is good. That means that it accepts the configuration. I'm going to take it out of debugging mode because you can't change stuff if you're in debugging mode. So, which you can either turn that off by coming to the cockpit, or you can come over here and right click this and you're able to do that also. Now the project name is whatever you actually save the project as. So that's why it was not populated before. So let's go into some other stuff you can do. So if you come here to PLCnext, this is where you can add your tasks. Now, the naming convention determines the type. So like cyclical 100 refreshes every 100 seconds, or you can see that here. So you can set your interval, priority, watchdog, and then you can also comment it. We're just going to keep that main instance in there, which is a program that's already configured. So if you go to local, you go to programs, and then you double click that main program. That's where you would add your code. You can either do structured text, you can do this kind of like block diagram, or you can do networks like traditional ladder logic. That will be shown off in a separate video of like what the actual functions of this you can do with it. There's plenty of different blocks and stuff you get. You get counters, comparisons, numerical stuff in math and data type conversion. There's a whole bunch of different function blocks. They're the IEC standard kind of deal. There's also extended function blocks for like data handling, Ethernet, file access. And you're also able to use your own function blocks within, so you also have Profinet stuff, Interbus, and stuff with the local controller. There's also safety stuff, but you're also able to upload your own function blocks based off of programming stuff that you've added in. So if you write a code in a higher language, you can have it directly interface and stuff. I would look more to your tutorials, to the actual Phoenix context information yourself if you have more questions about that. I only know so much about that myself. But also, if you go back to your project and check your IP subnet, you should see that everything is listed there now. So then the final thing I want to really show you is that kind of everything's on the left here is your layout. Kind of you have your digital in, digital out. You have your different ports and stuff, but pretty much everything is configured. And then the final thing we have here really, or there's final two things you'll do. So the PLCnext component, that's where you can like add in your components that you have added on. But there's also stuff here for an HMI built-in web server that comes available. So you have the ability to set up the ports and stuff. And then you can add pages to this application, and that allows you to configure different stuff and pretty much show. So like you could show your data that you'd be able to view it on a touch screen and interface with your PLC through that. So that because what the HMI stands for is human machine interface. And then the OPCA is actually, so if you had a database, you'd be able to subscribe to that and do direct read of stuff. And I'm not 100% sure how all that works, but again, refer to Phoenix contacts. You can go here and you can go to product information. There's also the help. Some other stuff you can do up here is expanding stuff. Rebuild just goes and confirms that all your stuff is good. So like it pretty much checks to make sure that like you don't have any errors. This is for filtering stuff. So like if I only wanted to look at, I didn't want to see network objects, you can make those go away. Those are also located right here, these filters. The edit is just the edit bars, so based off of what you're located in, you can do that. And then finally, you have your save and all your stuff here. Pretty much you just work through, and once you get connected, you can, there's a whole bunch of different stuff you can do with these controllers. You can make them communicate between the different modules, and it's a pretty cool system. So that's going to conclude my video on how to get set up with the PLCnext and configure it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have an easy time doing this. Again, I'm going to link those couple software things in the description, so they're right there available for download. Thanks, and have a great day.